hopefully you can see a slide from me now. So today and tomorrow, we're going to look at how you can best prepare yourself to secure your first headship. And some of the session will be me talking at you, as I would do in traditional face-to-face course, though I've also got a couple of tasks for you to do yourselves. So access to a laptop or a pencil and paper will be handy. And those resources should have come to you by email a short while ago, I hope. Because there are a good number of us, my bandwidth's playing up a little bit at the moment, can I ask that you do keep your camera off and your mic muted? If you've got any questions, add those to the chat and address them to David, and he will be your spokesperson at the end, and I'll deal with as many as I can in the time that we have. Feel free to give me a little bit of feedback from time to time using the reactions button to reassure me that you're still there. I will make a start. So if you're wondering why I've been asked to lead the session, well, I've got a long track record of securing headship posts for myself and for members of my senior leadership teams. I've just retired from being in schools full time. I'm now an inspector with the Independent Schools Inspectorate. I work with the prep school organisation IAPS, mentoring new heads. I also run my own consultancy as well as working alongside David here at ISP. I see a lot of new heads and do a lot of interviewing in independent schools, in local primaries and academies, and I'm also a governor. So I've seen a lot of people going through this process. Before we start, we need to understand what a head teacher is and what the role entails. You can't apply for something successfully until you know fully what you're aiming for. Now, you might be modelling yourself on your current head, or maybe you really don't want to model yourself on a current head and you think you can do things better, and that's why you're thinking of applying. Either way, the chances are, as Mark hinted, that you don't yet have a full picture of everything a head really does have to do. I certainly didn't at your stage. Going back to the start of my career, it used to be that heads were team leaders who had the final say in which curriculum will be followed, which children needed discipline. We've come a long way since then. Our schools can be part of multi-million-pound groups or significant charities. Some are medium-sized limited companies and the demands for market share is cutthroat. Modern heads are, as Mark said, CEOs in all but name, and in some senior schools they actually carry that title. Bit of history. Back in 2012, the National College of School Leadership, as it was then, commissioned research into what behaviours and leadership skills were necessary in the modern successful head. Besides the practical skills of dealing with a distressed child or putting a curriculum together that you'll have done as a senior leader, more senior positions need something a little extra. You need to develop system leadership skills. This is a very significant skill set, not only for seeing interconnected links in complex situations, but also leading successful improvements across systems and the organisation. In other words, seeing the best way to get things done. High-level strategic thinking is something we need to develop as well. The move from operational activities, which you'll be probably doing at the moment, through to strategic thinking is highlighted as you move to be ahead. Fullen, in his book, 2005, Leading in a Culture of Change, called this a framework for thinking about and leading complex change more powerfully than ever before, which sounds really exciting. In other words, we're looking at new ways that things could be done or new things that could be done to move the organisation forward. You'll need to develop the entrepreneurial and political skills and the emotional intelligence to build and sustain partnerships. This is key. The skills of persuasion, making new creative opportunities, networks and partnerships become highlighted because more consultation with different stakeholders and power brokers is needed as you go up the ladder, and it will be needed as time goes on. You need the cooperation of others, both inside and outside your school. You also need to have a good grasp of your own self-worth, the skills of patience, and indeed genuine humility. I think the strategic nature of the modern head's role necessitates far more awareness of other vested interests that can't be automatically be assumed to be aligned to those of yourself. And I think a successful acceptance of this approach can lead to far more success in the future. So there's some key skills. So given what Mark said and what I've just introduced there, you're still here. You believe this is a job that you can do and it's something that you want. Where are you going to start? Well, I would suggest starting your planning maybe 2 years before you actually want a job. That's not to say you shouldn't apply for something special if it comes up, but to maximise your chances of success, there's quite a lot of planning needed to be done before you make that first application. Firstly, you need to think about what kind of school you're comfortable to work in. Have you ever been in a through school, a standalone prep, an academy, an overseas school or a boarding school? How can you make decisions if you haven't seen these places in action? Are you most at home in disadvantaged areas or professional leafy suburbs? Do you recognise the trade-off between the relative autonomy of a small school and the financial pressures that they can face? Have you thought about how difficult it can be in a tied house if you don't get on with the senior head? But on the other hand, those larger organisations can offer some relative financial stability. Are you prepared to travel? And do you understand the differing fortunes of local markets in an area that's not your immediate locality? Would you consider working in a school that was someone else's family business or that was part of a mass national chain? Do you have a view on faith schools? Each of these different sorts of schools brings pluses and minuses and results in a school that will feel very different. Do your homework by looking at the websites. Go with your sports team on fixtures or talk to members of staff from these schools when you meet them on courses. You need to do your homework. You also need to know yourself. Which aspects of school life can you do confidently? For anything you're less secure on, then you're going to be relying on a good deputy in your new job, and that's a risk. Apply for jobs where you meet the criteria and you have experience to back up your application. You can't become an overnight EYFS expert or a master accountant if you've never come across it before. And to be honest, learning on the job, particularly in your first year as a head, is not ideal. So make sure you're secure and you can cope with it. The next thing you need is an accurate picture of who you are and what you offer. And this will test your analysis skills. You're going to need to write a serious list of pros and cons about yourself as a candidate. List all your training courses. Go through them and then prune any to disregard those that are past the shelf life. When you've done that, are there any obvious gaps that need to be filled? Anything you're a bit rusty on, anything you're out of date on, get it filled. Get your current job description out and map against it all the examples of what you've actually done. Now, we don't just want overarching philosophical statements here, but what you actually did. So not just that you launched an enjoyable new English scheme of work, but we need the impact. For example, that in response to a number of pupils not achieving their potential in writing, you led a group of colleagues in researching and implementing a new approach to teaching writing. You consulted with your team, you fed back to staff meetings, and you ran the staff training. And in the end, the children's results were 15% better than when you started. Use the STAR approach you can see on your screen to make your notes. And I want you to memorize this acronym because it will help you at interview. We're talking about the situation, a little bit of outline of why this task came about, what your actual responsibility was and the task, what you actually did, what actions you took, and then the results. Situation, task, action, results. It's a great way of packaging up all your examples. Now, we're not at the stage of doing job applications yet. All we're doing is taking a warts and all, cold and hard look at you yourself. And if you have not achieved one of your objectives, then be honest with yourself and let's take steps to address that. Also, note down your factual information on your CV. Your university stuff, your employment history, your training courses. Some schools accept CVs, some only accept application forms, but it's the same key information. And do it now to save time when you're stressed later. So we've got an emerging picture about who we are and what we want. The next thing I want you to do is transfer all this information you've got about yourself onto a copy of the National Standards of Excellence for Head Teachers, because that's what lots of heads jobs are based on. And you need to be able to talk fluently about them to get both the job and to progress your performance management once you've actually got the job. Some schools use them as developmental tools for heads. chairs of governors or senior school heads may work through them with you to develop you. You need to know there are 4 domains in the standards. There's one relating to your qualities and knowledge, one relating to pupils and staff, there's one about systems and processes, and there's one about self-improvement. And each of these domains, as they're called, has within them 6 key characteristics. And we can see one about pupils and staff on screen there. This one's from the 2015 standards. These were supposed to be updated during this year, but they haven't yet been published. It's easy to get hold of these. They're on the .gov website, NEHT site. And all I did was cut and paste into a table and put a second column where I could add some evidence that I could. Now, let's be honest. As senior leaders, you never get time to look at this stuff. So we're going to take some time now. I've sent you a document by email with the standards on and some prompts to help. I want you to take some time now to actually start to fill in what you can to evidence each of these boxes. Your applications are starting here right now. Then, as you go through, you're going to update those as you progress. Remember, this gives you the chance to evaluate your strengths and your weaknesses, and probably will help with interview questions later. So let's take 10 minutes to have a look and start to think about it. How do you meet these standards? Okay, take a few minutes, stretch your legs, get a pen and paper, get the documents out, and we'll come back in 10 minutes and move on from there. So what we're trying to do here is build your profile. We're seeing where you're strong, where you need development as a prospective head. And we're also doing work now that we don't want to be doing under duress at the last minute before an important application is due in. So it's all about the background work. Now, having done some background work, we can finally go to the TES, the Guardian, the IAPS website, your local authority bulletin, the agency websites for groups such as Russell Spears, Anthony Millard, Odgers, wherever, and start looking for adverts. Get the details and the job descriptions and the person specifications for lots of different types of school. And when you have a selection, you need to systematically go through them and identify the key features they all ask for, any common variations on the theme, and then make a note of any aspects that only this school wants. Some of them write in prose, but an increasing number helpfully do it in bullet points or even in table format, so that you can isolate the skills and attributes they're looking for more easily. So let's have a look at some extracts now from last week's TES to give you the idea. So here's an example from the new Chinese arm of Malvern College. Again, take a second to read that through. So what we're doing here is we're trying to work out what special features and attributes that each job requires. And the things we need to note in our analysis file that we're building up are those factors I've highlighted here. It looks like someone's read the same NCSL paper I told you about at the start of my talk. They want change management, they want emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, and some Chinese cultural experience. Now, it doesn't matter if this is not you, you're not applying for this job. And I suspect they clearly have someone very specific in mind. We're using this as an example to build up of our file of the sort of characteristics schools want from their heads. Here's another one. This one's Butte House, which is a girls' prep school in London. And again, take a second to read it through and see how that one feels. So I'm sure you'll agree, a very different feel from the previous one, and designed for someone who wants to build a supportive community. And again, from what I've highlighted, you'll see that they seek some personal attributes and some specific skills, especially the experience in curriculum development this time. And when you add these attributes to your file, you'll see that suddenly on both adverts, strong interpersonal skills and the word partnership are mentioned. So that's something to flag in your file and something for you to reflect upon in terms of your own experience. And partnerships, by the way, can be all kinds of things, from helping with the PTA to joint staff parent working groups. I've run these in my schools on topics such as homework, reporting, collective worship. And they're a good idea to get you involved with your stakeholders. The third example I've got is from an academy, and they've used the table of bullets approach. The whole thing was actually 5 pages long, so I've just taken a few samples for you here. I'm sorry there's so much on the screen, but hopefully you can take a moment to absorb all that. Again, a very different sort of language, but it's very clear what they're looking for, isn't it? They're looking for someone to drive the pupils and the staff forward. In there we see IT, performance management and statistics, alongside financial management and resource management, plus that effective communication phrase once again. Do you know, by the way, what the A and I letters in the right margin stand for? That's how they'll ascertain whether you meet these criteria either at interview or application, or indeed both. So once you've done this for about 10 different posts, you'll start to see some key patterns emerging. Excuse me. So then what we've got to do is what's called a gap analysis. We've looked at you and where your experience and skills are. We've looked at what skills and attributes the new posts are looking for, and we're now exposing the gaps between the two. Now, some of these aspects will be easy for you to find evidence for. Some of them you won't have seen before, or you may be light on experience. And those are the ones we're going to concentrate on. Looking at your list of attributes needed for headship, go and see your head and ask to either shadow them next time they do a particular project, for example, allocating departmental budgets, or ask for a particular project of your own, like introducing an enhanced RSE scheme into the curriculum. When I was doing this, I led a team to build and equip a new technology room, and I restructured the entire reporting to parents system. Doesn't matter what it is, but you need a whole school initiative on your CV in order to demonstrate your leadership credentials. So shadow or take on your own projects. Make it part of your performance management, because if it's in there, you're duty bound to see it through, and there's no excuses for shelving it. For some wider aspects, some colleagues have become school governors and learned about health and safety audits, or staff disciplinary panels, or parental complaint systems. Whatever your gaps are, find a way to plug them. Ellen, a new head that you're going to hear from tomorrow, broadened her CV by running a working group with parents on getting the volume of homework right. She took on the role of assessment coordinator in the school and actually worked with assessment providers GL as an advocate, and became a governor at a local primary school in a disadvantaged area of the city, which opened up all sorts of new doors for her. Fill your gaps, because once you're the complete candidate, then and only then are you ready to apply. Some people advocate doing practice applications. There's merit in this, but they do take an awful lot of time and emotional investment to get right. And you need to consider whether you can spare the time, and also how you would respond if a school actually made you an offer. I think when you see the right advert, you'll know. Look at the advert, get a flavour of the school, get those further details, scour the website for evidence that this is a school where either you'll be happy or one where you can do a meaningful job. Read the job description and the person's spec carefully. And if you can't immediately see a match between the job and you, as evidenced in those wonderful files you've been preparing, ignore it and move on. You won't get the job. You're wasting your time. Or worse, you will get the job, but you won't be fully equipped to do it. And you're setting yourself up for failure or hard times then. So make sure it's a match. Now, at some stage, you're actually going to have to fill out an application form. My advice is do the easy factual bits first and then double check for errors. Grammar errors, typos and spelling mistakes will halt your application right there. What does it say about you as a leader if you can't check your own work? Check with your referees that they're happy to be used and possibly send them a copy of your updated CV and the job description so they can be thinking about how to write about you in the best possible light. Next, look at how much space they've given you on the application form. Again, some schools still allow a letter of application, but many only allow the application form. So assuming your words are going to be no more than 2 sides of A4, don't waffle on, how will you make everything fit? You must address the points they're looking for in the job description and the person spec, and use the STAR approach to help with that. Larger schools, some local authorities have dedicated HR departments, and their job is to weigh through the applications and ascribe a points value to each applicant and how they evidence that the key requirements are met. And only those of you with the top point score get to interview. But because you've gathered evidence on all the key criteria and you can readily prove, using that STAR approach, that you're the one that they're looking for, you're going to get your interview. A quick note here about agencies. Someone asked about those. They do things in a similar way. Anecdotally, I've heard some candidates complain that people who applied for a previous job with certain agencies or are already on their books get bumped up the pecking order. I don't know how true that is, but regardless, if your application is good enough, it will be up there with the best. Excuse me. And finally, you will get an interview. Interview questions are not hard to predict, and a bit of forethought and pre-planning should see you right. They have to ask you a safeguarding question as part of safer recruitment. And if you didn't know that, then that's an area you need to brush up on really quickly. They'll ask you about your career and why you're applying for this job at this school. Note this job at this school, not just any headship at any school. And make sure your application reflects that too. Always cite the positive, never be disparaging about a current or previous employer. They'll probably throw something into the interview about new educational developments, so ensure that you've been reading those journal and Twitter articles and contributing to those LinkedIn forums. Use the information from your recent training courses. The interview should focus its questions on probing the points in the job description and the person specification, plus they're allowed a range of supplementaries. I must confess, it seems that not all governors we work with seem to have had that message, and some still ask all sorts of curveball questions. If you're on your game, that probably won't matter, but it will give you a clue about the sort of people you're going to have to work with and work for as you're in your new job. That might be worth thinking about. Now, I've also sent by email a document with a selection of safeguarding questions on, which I'd like you to look at. How well can you actually answer these? And again, in a traditional course, I'd take suggestions from the floor. We take a few moments, I'd come around and chat to you about them, but that's difficult today. I want you to take a few more moments to answer 3 of these questions. Again, you know that as soon as you leave your screen today, you won't get a chance to tackle this stuff for quite some time. So make a start now. We're helping you actually get something done before you go back to real life. So once again, I'm going to ask you to take 10 minutes to answer 3 of the questions, more if you like. These are the sort of things they might throw up to you at interview. Hey, and if you're on an interview panel yourself and you've got to ask the safeguarding question, why not use one of these to probe the motivations of your candidates as well? So there we go again. I'll ask you 10 minutes, please. Get your pencil and paper out, or do it on your laptop. Try and answer some of those questions in as detailed a way as you can. File it away when you've finished it. It's going to help you with your interviews as you go forward. I'll come back in 10. So I hope you found that useful. It's a chance to do some of the things that you never get a chance to do in real life because real life just takes over all the time. Looking at that interview question sheet, besides the questions, at the very, very top in the box, there are the marking criteria that the interviewers would be asked to use. Now, you remember I mentioned earlier about point scoring. That counts on your application. It also will count during your interview as well. If you've used that STAR approach and you've got a full and robust answer, you're always going to score well. And you can see the difference between category number 2, some experience, some pastoral tuition, to number 5, extensive experience, outstanding reflection, creative ideas, inset history, and so on and so forth. That's what you're trying to gear yourself towards. That's why we've been doing all this research. That's why you're trying to get the information prepared now in good time so that your profile builds as you go forward. You identify any gaps and we can fill those in good time before it really, really matters. So let's move on. Lots of selection panels also now introduce tasks to the selection process. And sometimes this can even mean a 2-day interview and you feel more like a contestant on The Apprentice than a prospective head teacher. Typically, these can include something like an intro exercise. My only hint there is always give the highest priority to the safeguarding cases. You might be asked to give an assembly, deliver a lesson, sometimes even unannounced, and probably a presentation to governors. And sometimes there are panels of staff or school council. Hopefully your experience as an assistant, head or a deputy will set you up for anything involving parents, staff or children. And the way you handle it comes down to you and your personal style. There's no broadly correct way of doing this. At the end of the day, if they don't like your personal style and you don't get the job, it wasn't the job for you. You have to be able to be yourself. And remember, an interview is as much about you finding out about them as them finding out more about you. I turned down one job after offer because there was just something I couldn't put my finger on that didn't quite feel right. And there was another one I should have turned down in my early career naivety. I didn't ask the right questions about financial sustainability, and I found out the hard way a year or so later. We put these things down to experience. You don't have to take a job just because they've offered it to you. It's got to feel right because you're going to put your heart and soul and your next 5 years of your career into this job. It's got to be a match. It's got to be right. So here's everything in summary. It's a 2-year job. Get the details for lots and lots of posts and analyze them carefully. Go through and establish the key characteristics, what they're looking for in the ideal candidate, and do that through a broad variety of different sorts of schools. Work out where the gaps in your personal application are. Which areas do you need to develop? Which areas do you need more training in? Where do you need to shadow your own head in order to gain access to those lesser seen projects that deputies don't always know about? Once you've worked out where the gaps are, fill them. And that's up to you to take the bull by the horns. Put yourself on training courses, shadow your head, ask the governors, ask the bursar, whatever it might be that's your personal weakness, get in there and have a go. Then when you're ready, apply. It's as simple as that. It works. I got my first headship when I was 34. I then got 2 more later at increasingly larger and more complex schools. I've mentored members of my own leadership teams and got them to use this method. Every one of them that wanted it got a promotion, and 5 have since become heads. So I wish you good luck in your quest. I'm going to unshare my screen there, and then I think we've probably got time for some questions.